total amount of a loan for 4 years. That $50 made a big difference back then. It's hard to imagine. But that was the main reason I came here, because of that and the fact that it was close and I could get at home.
I'm Phyllis White Shelton. This is my sister. Well, she chose to come here. I was a renegade and I went to the University of Sioux Falls. I was offered a scholarship to go to Sioux Falls College. And it wasn't that much, but it was $150. When I finished my graduation, I only owed something like $1,700. Compared to my son, you know, he went to school, he graduated, and he got a full ride scholarship because there's no way I could have paid his $450,000 bill.
Okay, I came to Augustana College because I heard that it had a very strong psychology department, and that was the attraction for me. And I believe you wanted to know about sense of community, and I left what was known and familiar from Des Moines, Iowa, my family. Coming to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Augustana College in particular, that wasn't the case, partially. But we will further elaborate why it wasn't the case, but a sense of community did develop.
Well, we got some close people. We heard from some close people. I came from Washington, D.C. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can myself. I came from Washington, D.C., which is a long ways away. I came here on a football scholarship. Also, at that point in time, the Vietnam War was raging, and that was an incentive enough for me to head west. I was recruited, and I came to Sioux Falls College, and it turned out to be a good experience for me, and a different culture, totally different culture. I don't know if any of you heard, D.C. used to be Chocolate City. Sioux Falls is not Chocolate City. So socially and community, it was a totally different community, a new learning experience, and one that's served me well over the 54 years since I left. So we'll elaborate a little bit more on that later, but those are the reasons why I came. I had a scholarship. And to qualify the ladies down there a little bit, it only costs $500 to go to these schools, $400 a year to go to these schools. If you didn't live on campus, it had to cost like $300. So when she said $50, you didn't understand. $50 is a long ways towards $300 or $400. It's not what you pay today.
Well, the reason I came here is they gave me partial scholarship, and I got recruited out of junior college, and there was 3 other students that said, well, you know what, I'll do it, you do it. So I was the only one that stayed the whole 3 years. The other 3, they didn't stay the entire time. And also, I met some valuable friends that I still have a close relationship with today. So it was a good thing for me to come out here.
Thank you. Yes, some students are really hurting right now hearing about the tuition costs. Do you have anything else we'd like to say from here?
Yeah, just turn it on.
It's on.
So just briefly.
Yeah,
It's okay, good. Okay. Well, let me just say very briefly, this is my older sister Carolyn. As she alluded to earlier, we live just a block and a half from the campus. So actually, this is just an extension of my living room. I was on both campuses all the time. They had athletic fields, played sports, played basketball, went to the library, studied. And the buildings were just wide open. You know, you could go in and see different exhibits, displays, and so forth. So it was just a pleasure to live in this neighborhood and be a part of this community, going all the way up through. And we'll talk later about the house too, but from grade school all the way through high school and the public school system here in Sioux Falls.
All right, so you all were youth who grew up during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. What was your experience with Jim Crow, and how did civil rights struggles really frame the formation of creating United Soul?
United Soul was a brain trust of a group of people who said, we have to get together. We have to find out who we are and where we're from, and we have to make a family. That's why it's United Soul. People united for one cause, and that's the relationship that we have with each other. We didn't find a community necessarily here that adopted us. Like I said, we came from Chocolate City, we came from Chicago, we came from different places, and as a result, we had to mold ourselves into what we wanted. Also, we didn't see things happening the way they were in the rest of the world. The rest of the world was not pendant towards us. It's not what you see today. What you see today is a result of organizations like United Soul, like Black Student Unions. Those are the things that were outcomes of our cause. And it wasn't a brain thrust. I mean, you know, we didn't go to a big auditorium. Most of the decisions were made in dorm rooms or their houses, these three houses. I mean, in their basements. We sat around, we talked, and we decided things. And as an organization, things that we would support. We challenged the administrations of both schools. They knew we existed. They only wanted to deal with our leaders, but they had to deal with all of us. And basically, some of the things that you have, that you take for granted, didn't exist, and neither campus. So we got together as a group and brought together United Soul. You saw a couple of pictures up here. One was JB. He was the initial president. And people ask me all the time, well, how did he become president? I said, I don't even remember. I really don't. And Edwin Lloyd, the other guy in the picture, he was the first vice president. But after the first year, we decided that we had common goals. However, we had distinctive goals for each school. So we created co-chairmans. RD had his co-chairman, and Sioux Falls had its co-chairman. And we worked as a unit for the causes of each community and what each school needed from our vantage point. So that's how United Soul got started.
I was going to say, when I was at Albany, they had societies. And when they formed United Soul, I was leaving as a senior, and I could never find an identity in any of these societies. They're no longer on campus, but if you look at all the old edits, you'll see the different societies and those type of things. And I also think that they needed the ability to form, to identify who they were, and also educate. You know, this was an education institution, and there were a lot of white people that didn't know about black people. So we wanted to educate those people. I thought that was one of the reasons we formed, the need to educate. And we did that through newspapers and some other things that we published.
Also, the Jim Crow South, we did not want to ever forget from whence to come, and our parents taught us that. And having personally experienced going to a water fountain was not pleasant because I was a young child, and I was told I couldn't drink water from that fountain. And the cleaning product back then, and I'm dating myself, but I already told you I'm chronologically mature. So it's called Dabo, and some of you know comment to see the white man clean that fountain after me when I wasn't accustomed to that living in Des Moines, Iowa. And also seeing the police, the firemen, and the dogs attacking black individuals in the South. My father being from the South, and he said, we're not going to have that. But he reiterated, don't ever forget from whence you come, as long as you have breath. So what Mr. Nix was talking about, along with others, that those are motivating factors that we knew a change had to come. And a change did come about through 25 young, gifted, and talented black students that made a difference, that you have the foundation that you stand upon today.
Amen.
Carolyn and Phyllis, I'm wondering if you want to share both maybe trips back home to Mississippi to visit family, and then also being members of St. John's Baptist Church and Martin Luther King Jr.'s visit in 1961.
Well, of course, I'll say it, I was born and raised here in Sioux Falls. To give you a little background information, both of my parents were born and raised in Mississippi. During World War II, my father got a job here in Sioux Falls, and after the war, he sent back to Mississippi for his girlfriend, our mother, and decided to settle in Sioux Falls. One of the reasons was because he knew that if he returned to Mississippi, the job opportunities would have been very limited for a black man. Now, being raised in Sioux Falls at that time, the black population was extremely small. It consisted of primarily our church, St. John's Baptist Church was our black community. And that's who we did a lot of community activities with. Now, one of the things I'll bring up from when I was growing up, every summer, when school let out after Labor Day, we were put on a train to Mississippi. We spent every summer in Mississippi, not coming back to Sioux Falls until Labor Day to go to school. A completely different world and environment. In Mississippi, it was entirely segregated. Staying with relatives, we were very seldom exposed to the white community. And part of the reason for that is our families were very protective of us. We walked places, they drove us places, they sheltered us from a lot of the things that were going on at that time. So it was a dichotomy between Mississippi and South Dakota, going back and forth. But it helped me become familiar with both communities.
One of the things that I can remember is that when we went to Mississippi in the summer, there were things that we could and could not do. So we knew that, like, if we went to the theater at that time, all the whites could sit on the main level. All the blacks had to go in the side doors and up the steps to the balcony. And it got to the point where we couldn't even sit in the front balcony because the whites would start throwing things up over the top. So pop, candy, whatever they had, they would throw up and hit us. Well, if we retaliated, we'd all get put out. One things that I do remember happening, I was with my grandmother on my father's side. We went to a store downtown. Being from Sioux Falls, we didn't have this, can't drink at that water fountain, we have to drink at this water fountain. going to get a drink of water. And in just that minute, I forgot where I was at, and I went to the wrong water fountain. This white gentleman cussed me and my grandmother out, but mostly my grandmother, and told her, you need to teach her her place. But like my sister said, we went to Mississippi every year. The last year that we went in the summer was 1964. When we got back to Sioux Falls, we were in school maybe a couple of weeks, and the Birmingham bomb went off. And after that time, we didn't go back until 1971.
Phyllis, I'm wondering if you can talk about King's visit to Sioux Falls and coming to St. John's Baptist Church.
Now, we did not know. For some reason, the children weren't made aware. I was not aware of it until I saw a picture of my dad in the picture with Martin Luther King. And did you know that he was coming in 61? I didn't know either. None of the children were ever made aware of it.
But let me just kind of add something to that. Another one of our team members, she's not here today, her name is Karen Marks, and she grew up in Sioux Falls. She was there at the time that Dr. King arrived in the city. And he came to the church, St. John's Baptist Church. And he actually came here for a speaking event, is my understanding. And he was there at the church. And there's a little parsonage area right next to the church. And he asked the question, let me talk, because all the adults were gathering around and so forth, which is understandable. But he wanted to talk to a young person. And so Karen happened to be there. She was kind of caught up in terms of her own emotional being. She wasn't really thinking about Dr. King, but her own little, she's a teenager at the time at best. So she was kind of in that world. So, but they had a conversation, and the conversation ended with, well, the question was from Dr. King to Karen was, how does it feel to grow up in a city place like this? And she told him, and the thing that she really centered on was this subject of freedom, to go places and do things with just excitement and enthusiasm as a child. And Dr. King, and you have to use your imagination a little bit, but later on in the speech, he said, wouldn't it be, the speech, the having dream speech, of kids being able to play with one another, despite, race, color, creed, ethnicity. So it was a wonderful conversation.
So our next question is Maurice and Clarice Coakley as parents, and Alfred White Sr., Carolyn, Phyllis, and Al's father, and George and Alice Vaughn all lived in close proximity to the colleges and acted as surrogate parents for everyone with United Soul. What kind of guidance did you receive from the Coakley, White, and Vaughn families, and what did it mean to you to have this sort of cross-generational support?
It was wonderful. It was wonderful because we left what was known and familiar in our communities, where we interacted on a daily basis with fellow African Americans, as well as living in Des Moines, Caucasians, white, black, whatever the title at that time in history that was befitting for that particular race. But on Sunday afternoons, in my family, we would go to visit the older relatives once a month, minimum, 4 times a week if the family could fit it in the schedule. But the long and the short of it, being together, laughing, talking, telling stories, first cousins outlining one another so they had a captive audience. Here we go to Sioux Falls. those wonderful Sunday dinners. We had that sense of community around the table, and we also had the parenting advice. They knew that we had our own way of thinking, but they always, all the families always encouraged us to keep our eyes on the prize. Get your education, don't forget from whence you come, and then get back to your community, serve others, and also providing sound advice in terms of what we call the crossroads in life. Yes, what are you going to do? The expectation, you're going to graduate, young people. Now, what are you going to do? And is it going to be, let's keep it real, is it going to be financially feasible? And that's the whole idea, because we were under the guidance of you go to school, you get a good education, you can get good jobs, and, you know, provide for family and giving back to the community. But in some cases, that didn't always happen because we had to deal with that word called racism. And with that, the reality that these respective families set us down and listened to us and prepared us and said, you know, if you operate from the premise of keeping your eye on the prize, treating people the way you want to be treated, seek out the good jobs, you know, showcase your talents, and your opportunity will come. In essence, they let us know that you gotta go through it to get to it, because the fruits of your labor will not be in vain. And look at us. It's not been in vain.
That's wonderful, Sam. You did it so well. But anyway, I always have to add, my brother Copeland, he said he worked his way through school. His father was wonderful. His father provided income. If he, without question, if he had a job and he needed extra college students, we always raised our hands, and he was always there. And he always gave us just a little bit more, and you had that feeling you got a little bit more. One of my friends, John Fields, he worked for his father the whole time he was in college. I mean, he didn't have any money. He was from Waltersboro, South Carolina. His family had no money. So his father provided the wear therewith. He didn't get the $50. He had to earn his $50. And Mr. Copeland, like you said, was wonderful. I mean, you just didn't work. He taught while he worked. And he says, you gotta do a good job to get a good pay. You gotta do a good job. You can't do a half job. And that's learned experience. And you learn it from an elder. And that's who he was to us. He was Mr. Copeland. We never called him anything else. It was Mr. Copeland. I mean, that's who he was. And he let you know real quick if you messed up.
Yeah. My family's house, which is on 28th and Summit, was a gathering place. And my mother was the best cook. She could fry chicken. You know, I check out places like Chick-fil-A, nothing like it. Right. So we never had problems gathering students. It was kind of a gathering place that we could get together and talk. And it was a wonderful experience to meet other students too in that environment.
We also lived close to the college, and my dad turned over our basement, which he didn't remodel. He pretty much turned it over to us and let everyone come over. We'd have dances, we'd sit, we would talk. He just loved it. And it got to those who knew my dad know that he was quite a talker. When people would come, you know, I get kind of jealous because he would, you know, he would talk and talk and talk, and they want to spend time with him. But he allowed us to come into the house, have our parties, have our groups. He supported us and he encouraged us.
like to transition to part two. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, finding voice, Black and Indigenous students. So my question is, both institutions tended to have only Black male student athletes enrolled in students early on. How did United Soul deliver a change in student recruitment?
That was kind of a crisis. I was telling somebody earlier today, when I arrived on Sioux Falls campus, we only had one female African American student. No, Karen Vaughn was the only African American female that we had on campus. We had about 7 or 8 ball players, basketball, football, whatever, but only uno. So the first order of business was to recruit and bring more African American women to Sioux Falls campus. And that was done in short order. It was done real quick. I mean, like 1 year done, 1 year 1, next year 10. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But it was necessary because the environment was needed for us to survive. And it wasn't because you needed a girlfriend. It was because you need somebody to talk to, a female perspective. That's what we needed, and not just us, but the white students need that also. Because if you think about it, the dorms they were in were all white, and that wasn't good for them. And they needed some Native Americans in those dorms. They needed everything. I mean, Betty Philander, she was in Sioux Falls. And it was just interesting how they interacted with her because she came from the Sioux Reservation. I mean, her interaction was very different than those people. And most of the people tried to do things with her, tried to interact with her. They befriended people. And this is in a women's dormitory. Men weren't in the women's dormitory. They had to have women in those dormitories to interact with the other women. And most of these people, as back in those days from Sioux Falls College, most of the white students came from rural. They came from farms. And most of you just assumed because you have phones and TVs, you didn't have TVs back then. I mean, people on the farm had to have antennas that went way up, and there were probably only 2 stations on their TVs. So they didn't even know what a black person looked like. Let's interact with that black person on a daily basis in the dormitory. So it was necessary to have African American women on the campus and women of Indian heritage, because it was necessary for them to see them that they're just people too. They studied, they did everything you did. They weren't different anything. They have goals and objectives. So that was a necessary thing. But it was initiated because of one thing. The coaches didn't want African Americans going out with white girls. That's the bottom line. And they had to change the environment to change how people reacted to it. And that's what they did. And that was one of the first things that happened from United Soul. We got more African American women on both campuses. Both campuses.
To piggyback off of what he said, there was an undercurrent at both schools with the African American men. It wasn't talked about a lot where we could hear it, but there was this undercurrent of African American men dating and talking to white women. And it was obvious, it was apparent in some cases, little was said, but there was that undercurrent. And that was one of the reasons that more black women started coming to this school. So there was that undercurrent, and occasional things did happen when there were attractions between students of different races.
1808 Menlo Avenue, located just a few blocks north of campus from where we are now, was the home of Carolyn and Phyllis White and the meeting place for United Soul. What did the place to gather and socialize mean to you? And why did you ask for a place physically on campus?
Our house, like my sister said, was halfway between both campuses. We could come, students could come to my house, and if it was ever on their mind, we could talk about it, we could discuss, we could argue, we could do anything with the topic. We were not able to get a place on campus like the sororities and different other organizations were able to do. But our main goal was to be able to sit down and talk out our problems or what concerned us without having eavesdropping. Because if you get in a group and you're on campus and you're talking, somebody's gonna walk by or listen to what you're saying, and it's gonna get around. And so mainly it was a place of where you could have absolute assurance that what you're talking about or discussing, having fun about, joking, stayed within the group.
Well, the interesting thing from my perspective, because they were older, I was probably in junior high school. So they would come into the house, and you could just tell a burden had been lifted somewhere, somehow. And a lot of laughter, music, and they'd wear these little berets and so forth. And I was in junior high school, and I was like, wow, Black Panthers are even here. So it was just kind of fun for me to see. Yeah.
So both Augustana and Sioux Falls College were predominantly white institutions. In some ways, this is understandable given that Augustana was founded by Norwegian immigrants. How did United Soul help Black and Indigenous students transition to and navigate in white majority colleges? And maybe you can, Phyllis and Carolyn, if you can talk about connecting with Wanda Janice and Sonny Q. Wilson on campus.
It's on. They told me I could handle it. Here again, it's so important to recognize that you bring your background experiences to the present setting. We came from different backgrounds, some from the reservation, some from the urban areas, and some of us from suburbia, a couple suburbanites. But what was important that we had to have an understanding of coming together. When we would come together, we found out that we had a lot of commonalities. Earlier, when I made the statement about sense of community, that it wasn't there initially, but through coming together, talking and sharing a sense of community we had, but it was important to educate those that were not people of color, persons of color, those that had different religious beliefs. I'll share this with you. I came from a strong Baptist church where it was amen. We talked back to the preacher to validate. I am in the chapel, Augustana College. The preacher said something that I could relate to. I said, amen. 300 students turned around and looked at me like I had lost my natural mind. So we knew something, so important is that for me, coming from my culture, needed to be recognized and appreciated. And I learned that when you're in chapel, that you listen, you do not respond back to the minister or the presiding officer. But that cultural background experiences you do bring to your present setting, but also we knew that we had to adapt to survive, but in order to adapt, that we had these conversations where we wanted to make a difference, and the difference in terms of not only sharing about our culture, we learned about the cultures of Augustana and Sioux Falls College. Earlier I said we had a lot of commonalities. That's where my mind shifted, but also I knew the importance of sustainability, where to recognize that I'm not going to give up my African American culture, but I can share. And we decided that we're going to make this a learning experience for those individuals that didn't come from the areas that we came. We knew right away we had to make the adaptation, and in doing so, it did create better human relations between the both cultures, the whites and the blacks. But you don't ever hear again, forget from whence you come, and you turn it around. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say a negative experience, it was a cultural shock experience. Negative? Learning, definitely. Not negative, but learning. And so with that came about a better understanding and realizing that we can make a difference. But sometimes it takes someone from a different culture, a different upbringing, a different mindset to cause, hey, I never thought of it from that perspective. Now, we weren't asking for a complete overhaul, but what we were asking for, as shown in those demands, and yes, that's a strong word, and we meant for it to be strong, so a change could come, and a change did, as I shared earlier with the previous question. So, with that comes what we're doing right now, here today. 1968, here we are in 2024. Truly, a learning experience.
How many of you have ever watched TV with a Native American? Raise your hands. With a Native American. It was a learning experience for me with Wanda and her friends. We were watching the typical Western, and the cavalry was chasing the Native Americans. And guess what Wanda was rooting? Who they were rooting for? The Native Americans. They weren't rooting for the cavalry. Here comes the cavalry. It was a learning experience for me of their experience. They had a different experience. You can take from every culture, not just black and white, but from Native Americans also, because they come from a different place. They were hollering and screaming. I said, what's going on here? Because they were for their people.
There were two incidents at one of the meetings. And one time, we had turned the music on and we were dancing. And Wanda Janice and her brother were there. And they just kind of looked at us and they said, well, you need to dance the way we dance for once. And they got up and proceeded to teach us a Native American dance. And we were in a circle and we were just moving, and it was fun. But sometimes you have to experience, even in our group, we have to experience each other's culture in order to advance.
one more experience which was earth shattering. We were in student unions together, and we were sitting around, and we had a congratulated Native American, who was Native American. We were all sitting at the table. She ran out of the room. She ran out of the room. She physically ran out of the room. So I said, did somebody say something to her? Was that something wrong? Did we do something wrong? And so I continued to go out behind her to find out where she went. She was just out wandering around on the campus. And I said, why did you run out of the room? Did somebody say something to you? She said, no. It was too loud for her. She was used to quiet. I never heard that in my life before. They were used to quiet. She wasn't used to a lot of noise. And it was just, and you know how sometimes you get up in the union when people eating, so much noise, you want to run out yourself. But she ran out of the room. Talking about learning experience. That has stayed with me since I was in college, since that happened. Because that was a learning experience for me about their culture and how they live.
So United Soul printed a underground newspaper called The Raven at St. John's Baptist Church, and then distributed copies of Black viewpoints on current affairs, such as the writing of African American scholar W.E.B. Du Bois. As a sociologist, I'm very excited about that. You all also put on a campus play titled I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas, which pertained to African American traditions. Why was it so vital to get these perspectives on campus? What conversations did they open up with your white peers?
You were part of the play. Anyway, the reason the play was written by John Barnett, one of us. He was a great author, and he wrote for the Raven also. I mean, he was there. I mean, he could write. I mean, this guy, he should have worked for the newspapers, but he could really write. And he wrote this play, and the play was aimed at sharing things about our culture versus the white culture, so white people could understand. Because we felt that because of lack of exposure, a lot of people on campus didn't even understand where we were coming from. They were scared of us, really. That we had lives, we celebrated Christmas just like they did. We did everything. We went to church. We did all the things they did. But this play illustrated this, and it was written by John Barnett. I never kept a copy of it. But I remember you were in the play. You and Emma and all of us were. Yeah. So it was a learning experience for everybody, and it was one of those tools that you use in your toolbox, along with the Raven. And does anybody figure out why we call it the Raven? First of all, the Raven's black. That's obvious. And he's a terror. The Raven terrorizes things. He just doesn't take things as they are. The only bird that really gets after the raven is people. Ravens don't fool with eagles. Very few birds fool with eagles. But that's the reason why. And we did a lot of writing on different subjects. The subjects showed a different point of view. Everybody has their point of view, but we wanted to show our point of view. And it wasn't a long newspaper. It was no more than 10 or 12 pages, but it was something that expressed where we were coming from. And I guarantee you, every person in administration read that paper. I know they did, because they responded to it by making statements about it. I said, you must have read the paper. Because the only way they would have known to respond was because they had read the paper. Everybody knew about it. Saying the underground newspaper, it wasn't underground, it was above ground, it's just how we paid for it was underground. We worked through St. John's Baptist Church to get it done, but I was a treasurer United Soul. And, it was a struggle sometimes to get that thing published. It really was, because we had, I mean, St. John's would let us use this stuff, but we had to provide the paper and all that kind of stuff. And we used colored paper also, by the way. It wasn't printed on black and white, it was printed on the color paper. So it was, we had to find out where we could get that. But see, I was also a business manager of the school newspaper, so I had a lot of ends. So I figured out a lot of things to just done. But no, it was, the Raven was a work of art. It really was. And you gotta remember, the people who were doing all this stuff are college students. I mean, you're writing plays, you're putting on plays. We weren't thespians. We were people trying to show what we were and who we were to a whole generation of people that were in college. And just not the students. This was for the administration. This was for the staff also. This was for the faculty. Everybody participated. I mean, I remember going to the business office once, and one of the persons in the business office asked me a question about it. I said, what do you find about that? She obviously read the Raven. So it spread all over the place. I don't know about down here in Artie, because I just blew through Artie. I didn't really interact with a lot of people. But up in Sioux Falls, it was rare. And some things, I think, were understood, and some things weren't, and that's why we had questions. There's always another question.
The Raven created a lot of conversations. Sioux Falls College, who we call Subuku, and Augustana, the Subuku and Augie would gather in the huddle, and we would have conversations. But with the Raven articles, it provided an opportunity for white students to come over to where we were and ask questions. It did happen at the huddle. So there were conversations, and sometimes you just have to approach things sometimes head on or go through the back door to get results. And the Raven created an opportunity for conversations. I remember students coming over to us, and it wasn't like, oh, well, here they come, go away. We were proud, to share about our background experiences, our thoughts, what we were experiencing, and it did. This is where I said earlier, it changed the culture. It was coming around, and you have to have a platform to start. Somewhere you have to start from to get things going. And trust me, the Raven got a lot of things going. And with that, we just wish that John Barnett could have been here today, but for medical reasons, he's not present. But he had a way in his unique, very proud to be from Chicago style, to not let us sit there and be, as expression goes, bumps on the log. He made you search, dig within, deeply, as they say, dig down into that well, and let's don't give any old answer. Let's tell our truth. Let it make sense. Let's don't embellish anything. Tell it like it is to generate conversations. And his writings did do that.
So part 3, Soul Days, the lasting legacy of United Soul. I'd like to talk about social impact now. So Augustana and Sioux Falls College collaborated starting in 1971 on Soul Days, a week celebrating Black Pride. United Soul also brought many guest speakers to campus, such as poet Sonia Sanchez, actress Ruby Dee and Dick Gregory, sculptor Oliver Legrone, Count Basie, put on soul food dinners. Why did United Soul think it was critical for colleges to showcase Black intelligence and creativity in all its forms?
Okay, so I'm the youngest. And started, they asked for these demands. They wanted to see more happen. And after they left, things started falling into place that they had started. And like I explained to them on one of the Zoom meetings, they said they didn't know what happened if their demands were met. Well, their demands were met. We had a floating black professor that would come once a week and teach a black history class. And it was a joint class between both campuses. We also had speakers. They spoke here at Augustana, here at Augie. And the first year, Dick Gregory came. And he talked physically to 600 people attended his lecture. Well, after the lecture, he met with the black students one-on-one. We were able to talk to him. He advised us of different things that we could do on campus. But he talked to us about what we needed to do in order to carry forward once we graduated from Augie and the coup. A lot of the information was very helpful. Different paths we could take in order to, I guess, what would you say, take what you learned here, how to advance in the black community once you left. One thing is that the people here in, the blacks here in Sioux Falls, we went to the coup, we went to Augie, but our education would not allow us to get jobs in Sioux Falls. Being hired in Sioux Falls after we graduated, there was no jobs because the white community would not hire us. All the jobs I had from the time that I started working until I graduated, I had was either a government job or a job where the government had given assistance, like to the school district, they had got funds from the federal government and bill system. Otherwise, there was no place for us to do a job. The second year, Ruth B. and her husband Ozzie Davis spoke. And afterwards, again, they talked to the black people. Now, a lot of things they talked about was in their profession and what was coming up at that time. Back in 72 and 73, they told us that the biggest thing coming up was cable TV. You can keep cable TV if we had any money to invest in. But it was a real enjoyment in order to talk to them and get their views. One of the things they brought a big band in and they had a dance for us. The dinners we had the last 2 years I was here, they had soul food. It was held, one year it was held here in Augie, one year it was held at the coup. And they got cooking. I mean, the food was delicious. It was what we would have on a Sunday, the real down-home soul food. So the demands that my predecessors put in were actually realized. Now, after I left, I'm not sure exactly if it continued on. I learned that they had black student unions at both their universities now. Back then, okay, I graduated in 73. Back then, it was still Augustana College and Sioux Falls College. So I understand that they do have black student unions. Did that answer the question?
Sure did, thank you. So in 1974, Augustana launched a minority studies minor, reflecting a larger trend across the United States in which universities added Black and African studies to their curriculum during the late 1960s and early 1970s due to student activism. How did Augustana arrive at these particular curricular changes, and what did they mean to you?
I really can't address that because I left in 1970, so someone who was there after that can speak to that.
I'm less than 70.
In 68. What was the question? I'm trying to answer.
We're speaking to how universities, including Augustana, launched minority studies minors. And across the U.S., we were seeing trends of Black and African studies being added to various university curriculums.
I think that was a trend, that's it. It was a trend that I think, Augustana picked up on. And it seemed like to me, Augustana was very progressive and did things like that. They measured where they were at, and what they were doing, and they always did what was right, in kind of a Lutheran liberal sense, and what was right for people, as I remember.
The thing that was very interesting, and younger, these are all my heroes, and just amazing in terms of achievers, as such. But the trend, and I went to college at University of South Carolina, Vermillion, and during the 70s, early 70s, and the acceleration in terms of what was happening in the country, the trend we speak about, and so forth, were just completely in full motion. Now, I can't speak to any African American studies there at USD. There certainly was discussion about it and so forth. But, the thing about being Black at that time in this country, all of a sudden, was a very attractive thing. And it was just, I guess here's the point that I want to make for this, is that a lot of things changed very quickly between the late 60s, mid-60s, late 60s, as you got into the 70s. It was a tremendous difference between that time.
So our final question before turning over to the audience for question and answer is, obviously the United Soul changed the trajectory of higher education in Sioux Falls. Both institutions now feature Black student unions as well as other organizations for historically non-dominant groups of students. What advice would you give them to working towards an education that is relevant to their respective cultures and traditions?
One of the things that my father told the 4 boys in our family, he said, you go to college, you can do what you want to do, but make sure that you do as best as you can do. Because when you get out there, a lot of times, you're not evaluated the same because of being a minority. And I want to send the message, the second message that my dad told the 4 boys is that should give you motivation to do whatever you do in college, to excel and do as best as you can as humans. So that's the message that I like to put out for minority students. Sometimes you're not measured, but that should be motivation to do the best that you can do whenever you do.
Keep your eye on the prize, as I said earlier. Get your education, and then once you have that education, then the experiences will come to you in terms of job. The other thing I want to share with you, once you get on that job, listen to what people are not saying. Body language says a lot. And my father taught their family of girls. The Coakley's had to run on the boys, and with the Bell girls. But all humor to a side, that when you're around cultures, I don't care if you're Black, white, whatever the culture may be, observe that culture, not so much what they're saying, but what they're not saying. And Carolyn phrased it very well, undercurrents. You have to be aware of those undercurrents, and once you're aware, then he said, okay, this undercurrent exists, but how do I navigate these uncharted waters? And that's where you start to ask questions that, I was just curious, how is this coming along? So once you learn the lingo, then you can survive that environment and you can move your ship right on through that water. And you will have the results of not only did you do it, but then the next step is to pass it along to the next person within a respective culture. I'm not saying go against another culture, I'm just sharing, be aware, because wherever you go, there are going to be sharks out there. My father used to say, baby girl, look out for those barracudas, because they will bite. But the way you can avoid those barracudas, you watch the school of fish around them, and you say, I don't think I want to swim in those uncharted waters today. But the point, eye on the prize, don't forget from whence you come, watch the body language.
Thank you very much. I think before we move on to our Q&A, I would first like to take a moment for a round of applause for our United Soul members.
I'd like from the panel to thank the committee and all the work that you had to do to put into this. And also Zach, who was involved, Al too, who was involved as not a panel member. And all the Zoom meetings we had and all the work that was done, I'd like to thank those.
Do we have any questions from the audience that we'd like to have?
Hello, my name is May, and first of all, I would like to say that the work you guys did at your time really reminds me of the song Queen Monsan, that is being young, gifted, and black. You guys did a lot of things that enabled even me as a Nigerian international student to be able to be here. So I want to thank you for that. And I do have a lot of questions, but for the sake of time, the first question I would like to ask is, being at the time of segregation, how did you manage to not have the same hatred that was shown towards you to the people that showed you this hatred? You understand? Like, how were you able to want them to know your culture? Because, like, for example, me, I'm from Nigeria, as I said before. I've been colonized, we were colonized by the British, and they stole a lot of our arts, they stole a lot of our culture, they stole even our language, because right now a lot of people my age cannot speak our native language because we were forced to learn to speak English. So how are you able to still, how were you able to still want to share your culture with these people when they are actively pushing you away from being a human being? Do you understand? So that is one question that I would like to ask.
Yeah, I can answer that. Obviously, there's gonna be some that are gonna be like that, but there are other people that wanna share because of what they can learn from us, because we're different. And, I'm sure that, the majority of the people that I've interacted with as I left here, that was their attitude. Some weren't, but the majority of people, they see that you're black and different, they're gonna try to assimilate and understand and learn something from you. So any individual, I think, that wants to learn anything is gonna try to get involved, understand, ask questions of people that they are not like.
Growing up
I stepped out of my house, went to school, I had to live in a completely white world. So I had to learn where they were coming from. I had to react. So a lot of things I suppressed, and I did it for a long time. And it took my youngest son saying, "Mom, why are you doing that?" And it dawned on me a lot of things I just suppressed. I worked in a white world. You know, even though I live in Kansas City, I still had to operate in that world. It's been a lot easier. A lot of times people would ask me questions and I would just give them the standard pat answer. And my son, like I said, pushed me. So I can talk now about different things and how it affects me. But a lot of times you have to learn, like working in a white world, you have to know what you can say and what you cannot, what sets them off, sets the white person off as opposed to, you know, just going with the flow. So it is hard at times to live as yourself. It's not as hard now as it was when I was in college. And hopefully for my children it's a lot easier, but they have barriers too out there, but at one point you have to learn. And the fact that, I always joke, I said if I'd known now, what I know now, if I'd known back then, I would have studied a lot more, because I ended up becoming a pastor's wife. And so now, being a pastor's wife, you learn different things, techniques, being able to talk to people. I said, I wish I'd known a lot of things I've learned now back then.
The foundation, young lady, for African American culture is called the church. And that came from slavery, and that's when we gathered strength from the source above. And it has trickled down from generation to generation. But we have an inner strength because in our culture, prayer is the key to heaven, but faith unlocks the door. So it started with the church. That's the background. They gave you the present, and so now the puzzle should fit together.
That was certainly so well said, and an excellent question, a question I can truly appreciate. You know, the thing that I reflect on being at this particular stage and season of life is that, you know, you are the totality of your experience and what you have been exposed to. And especially now, a couple of things really, in terms of the season of life, one. And the second thing is that as we've looked at the history here of Sioux Falls, a heritage that exists, we are indeed standing on those shoulders of our ancestors and so forth. You know, everybody faces barriers for various reasons. I've become very confident in terms of the barriers that I've been able to face or kind of work my way through is really more the point. I see a gentleman back there. Graduated with me from high school. We were roommates in college. I was best man. Tom, please stand up. I was best man at his wedding. Rhonda, please stand up. Two of my closest friends in life, and I'm very pleased and very proud to have them both here today. I think the thing for me is that I had a father, and you know, I would see what he would go through and so forth. A lot of times I didn't appreciate it at the time, but just through life, through the things that I've been exposed to, I just marvel in his strength. And I say that in terms of my dad, Edward Sr., Marty Coakley, and there's more and others here in the city of Sioux Falls that were friends of our family. They were family to us. So, you know, you're gonna have those barriers, but just think about those individuals that have overcome before, walk in their path. you can't be, what's the word that I want? You can't be defeated. You just gotta push through it, spiritually, physically, and mentally. But you can do it, and I can see it in your eyes right now. It's already working.
Hello? Oh, sorry. I just first want to say thank you as a BSU member, which is a Black Student Union. And I also wanted to say, as a future Black educator, I often find I'm having very tough conversations, which I'm sure all of you really have. Mentioning the word Black or talking about being Black in Sioux Falls. So I was wondering what just gives you the strength to have these tough conversations and like guides you to be able to articulate yourself.
For me, a lot of it comes from my father and the other African American people in the Sioux Falls community when I was growing up, like the Coakleys, and there were other Black families. And as I think back, most of our parents have jobs that nowadays would be considered low-income jobs. We were raised in families. Our parents were able to purchase homes. They provided us with the security that we needed to grow. I marvel at my dad and some of the other Black members of the Sioux Falls community, what they had to go through and how they survived and how they managed to raise such productive children. I give all my credit to them. And thanks to the way I was raised, thanks to the Sioux Falls community, it took getting away from Sioux Falls for me to realize that I had a fabulous upbringing here in Sioux Falls. It was wonderful being raised here. There were problems like there are in a lot of other places. I got a fabulous education. I'll always be grateful to Augustana for that. But I think my family and the other Black families in this city that helped us become the people that we were able to become.
I guess all you observe, I come from a totally different background. I came from Chocolate City. It was easy for me to say I'm African American for Black because that's where I lived. I went to an all-Black high school. There were 5 white people in my high school. So I had no problem doing that, and I relished. The Black church was a given in my neighborhood because there weren't any white churches. So I was raised in a Black church. So everything I did was Black. So it was easy for me to associate with Black. Where I failed was when I went on the job, because you had to work for it, and you had to work through them to get to accomplish what you needed to accomplish. I'll give you one quick example. I worked for a lady in GSA. Her name was Miss Bailey. She was a Southerner. She didn't think we could even she didn't think we could do nothing. So my task was to prove her wrong. I was a grade 7 doing a 15 job. So I did the job better than the 15. So she gave me an award. And she told everybody about this little Black boy who worked for her. She never said an African American. She said this Black boy worked for her. And I didn't take insult to that because she was older. And as a result, sometimes you self things a lot. You self things. You're looking at yourself saying, how can I say I'm African American? How can I say I'm Black? You just say it and let them deal with it. That's what you do. And that's always been my mantra of just saying, I'm African American. I worked in a corporation where I was always the only Black person. And that's gonna be in some of your lives. You're gonna work in positions where you're the only black person. My daughter always asks me, Dad, why is it everybody that works for you are white? I said, because where I'm at a level where only white people get those jobs. So it's up to us to get those jobs. That's what I told her. It's up to us to get those jobs. And she said, but they work for you. I said, no, it ain't difference. I know more than they do. And they realize at some point that I do. So therefore, you have to take pride in what you're saying. If you don't take pride in being black, if you don't take pride in being an African American, then how can you express that to somebody else? You can't. You have to take pride in it. And you have to be able to articulate that. So I hope I answered your question a little bit.
We have time for one more question.
Hello, my name is Jenna Hageman, and I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Will Wright and Zach Van Harris Jr. on researching black homes in Sioux Falls. So I know a lot of your last names, and it's good to put a face to my name now. But I'm also the vice president of the Black Student Union, and I was just wondering how you guys would like us to carry on United Soul's legacy.
I was quite surprised. Some years ago, Edwin O'Berry Lloyd came to speak to somebody down here, and I was quite surprised it was still going on. I had no way of knowing that United Soul had continued. It was no way for me to find out. I didn't get any briefings or anything on it, so I didn't know. And so what you have to do is, I think as Sandy would say, you have to use that as a stepping stone. And you have to carve your own way as a Black Student Union on this campus. You have to address the needs of the students, all the students. Because some of the students, they need our help too. Because everything ain't right with them too. It's not right with them. So you have to be a catalyst to making this campus the kind of campus that any student coming here would want to attend. That's what your job is. And it's supposed to make the African American or indigenous people comfortable on this campus. And that should be your mission. And you're coming from a legacy of things. I think Phyllis went through a lot of things that I never saw because I wasn't here. But things that we laid the foundation for that created the things that she said, the activities, the professor and everything coming here to teach us American studies. And not in my father's notion would I ever dream that would have taken place on either campus back when I was here. It was just impossible. So stand on the legacy that was built and create an atmosphere for all the students. And the big thing that Sandy talks about, education. It's about education. First you have to educate yourself. You have to know what the students want. You have to know what students need. You can't anticipate or just, I think they want it. You need to know. Because if you step out there and you do things to make that happen, then you have to know that's what the students want. Because there are always going to be some naysayers. So you have to overcome that. But you have to go with the group and the majority of what they want. I hope I answered your question.
I'll take a crack at this if I may. Good question, certainly. The thing that I envision is that when you do, as Mr. Nix was saying, establish a standard certainly for your group and organization. But the one thing I would suggest is to propel yourself out into the community and creating partnerships with different organizations, through service type projects, that type of thing. For the purpose of, and for the purpose for the service that you're providing, certainly, but exposing yourself to the community out there. So students will want a name as such being established that folks will want to join, want to learn about the group, and ultimately join the group in the organization. So I think that would be a huge benefit to you.
My son always asks me, Dad, what kind of nuggets can you provide to me? So I'm gonna give you a nugget. This is just off the top. I'll just give you a nugget. All you are attending Sioux Falls College or Augustana, and you're saying to yourself, I'm going to a small school. This is in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. How am I going to move into the big world out there? How are they going to accept me? How are they going to look at me? They're not going to look at you any different than any other student. It's what you do here that counts. The academics that you do here. What you learn here, which is important. I've worked for every major corporation in this country, and nobody has ever asked me where Sioux Falls, South Dakota is. They never ask. The only question they ask, do you have a degree? And what is the degree in? They never ask where it is. If you go to grad school, that's even better. Then you add something else to your resume. So then you have another talking point. I applied for a job at Ford Motor Company. And I asked, no, this wasn't Ford, this is when I was working with Volkswagen. The guy said that I just sent a resume in, just send it in to see what happens. I said, how many resumes did you get? He said, 3,000. Think about that, 3,000 resumes. And this is back in my time, this is not your time. This is back in my time. 3,000 resumes. I said, how did you sift through that to find 3 viable candidates? He said, I didn't. I gave it to my secretary with a criteria. Remember that, a criteria. The criteria was, I need somebody with an undergraduate degree and 12 years of experience in the field. And she came back with 3 candidates. So he interviewed the 3 candidates. Now, in today's time, that could be a virtual interview. It could be all kinds of things. So the point is, they aren't necessarily interested in where you went to school. It's what you did at school and what you're able to bring to the table. That's what they're interested in. I always interview people, and I always want to hire somebody who hit the ground running. A limited training, orientation would be a better word. And so it doesn't matter where you came from or who you are or what color you are or anything else. It's what you're going to do when you get there. You have to go there with the energetic and the ideas that you're going to do something when you get there. And that's what happens in this world. That's your nugget for the day.
And with that, please let me thank our panelists from United Soul. You want to come up and have a one-on-one conversation, that would be great. So thank you, everyone.
And please consider coming to the Affinity Space unveiling at 5 p.m. and that will be taking place in Solberg. Thank you again.